from them, so they don't even truly know.
Yeah, well, the IRS will confuse a lot. There are three avenues of thought, and you have to be patient with the timing on this, and there's a couple of reasons here. You want to be slow to cash out the dinar, and here's a couple of reasons. And first I want to put up front that I'm not a financial advisor, but just looking at the situation here, to be cautious is to be slow in cashing these out. And here's the reasons why. If you take it as just a straight capital gains, if you go cash them out right up front, most likely you're going to get hit with a 35% tax capital gains. If you wait a year and a day, you're probably going to get long-term capital gains of about 15%. Now, that's assuming the IRS is still in place. But with the new currency and the government being debt-free and the people being debt-free, I don't think my guess is I don't believe the IRS is going to be in the same game any longer, and they may not even come into play. So those are the three schools of thought you should consider. And some people have talked about a base rate. I don't know. I'll tell you a little story about that, and if there's any IRS agents listening, I'm past the statute of limitations. So I'll take you back to 1973 for a moment. When the U.S. went off the gold standard in 1971, they started floating the U.S. dollar against the Deutschmark. And they did this so that Boeing and a lot of other people could sell a lot of heavy equipment to the Germans. Where I was right there in Nuremberg, right there on the base, was an American Express bank that had the contract from the Department of Defense to provide banking for the GIs on there. The interesting thing about the American Express is if I took American dollars, which I got my pay as a soldier, and I went into American Express and converted them to Deutschmark, I would get a 3.5% discount on my Deutschmark. And then if I walked off the base 3 blocks down the street and went to Bundesbank, I would get a 3.5% to 4% discount on dollars. So I would take $1,500 and I would go get Deutschmark, and I would walk downtown, I'd take that and I'd go buy dollars, and I'd come back with about $1,600. And then I go back and I get more Deutschmark, and then I would come back and I have about $1,800. And I could do this 3 or 4 times a day. So I don't want to go into how much I made, but I made a lot of money doing that over a course of about, maybe a month and a half. And so we had I don't know if he was a real IRS agent or just somebody for the Army that would advise soldiers on how to fill out their taxes. When I explained this to him, he said, I don't know how you would base that because you're exchanging currencies. I don't know what your base would be, what your base value would be on that. So this guy just said, I don't know what you would report, so I guess it's not income. Now, that's changed a lot. So I kind of walked in 1973 and made a lot of money just by exchanging currency. But that might be what happens this time. And I'm saying might be, but I would exercise a great amount of caution as this thing goes forward. And assume at the beginning you're going to pay a short-term capital gain of 35% based on the net value you cash out for against what you actually pay for the dinar. And that's the safest way you can do it.
Right. Yeah, and most of us are, we're not trying to get one over on the IRS. We've always instructed people to do the right thing, and we do about the 35 to 15%, depending on when you purchased it and how long that you, of course, have had that. The next question that really pops up for me, and again, it's something that people, again, just it's hard for them to wrap their heads around, is that, we're saying that there's going to be a new currency, which means that the Federal Reserve is going to be non-existent, which means the IRS is pretty much going to gradually fade away into the sunset. We hear things where there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be tried for possible treason to, and not just here in the United States, but, around the world for, supporting this entire crazy mechanism of what the central bank has been doing and so forth. But how can you actually, because I remember when a gentleman brought this to me, I'm sitting there thinking, like, how are they going to suddenly get rid of, throw the people into prison, get rid of the federal government, blah, 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 so forth and so on. How are they going to pull this all off? I mean, there's got to be a huge game plan put in this. How are you going to do this without disrupting the people? I mean, it's hard enough for people to fathom, who killed JFK, let alone, all the craziness that could possibly come out of all the dirty secrets or any number of things. How do you keep all that wrapped up? How do you go forward and change something so drastic that we've been so used to for so long, and suddenly switch gears and go into something else without everybody finding out about it, without the the United States having? I know that you're going to have all these debts and so forth, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, how can we all be able to wrap our heads and think logically about this for a moment? And if there's no way possible, I totally understand, but there's got to be a plan put in place.
Well, sure there is, and I have to take you back to Dachau. We're going to have our march through the Dachau concentration camp, but it's going to be the whole country. And one example that I know firsthand was the March 2003 bombardment of Baghdad. While everyone was watching the shock and awe, we were dumping 12,840 cruise missiles on Baghdad. And these were not the neat ones you see on TV that go through the window or down the chimney. These were first-generation cruise missiles that weren't exactly that good. Defense intelligence analysts estimate that 80% of those missiles did not hit their targets. And they went into shopping centers, and they went into schools and mosques and residential areas. I actually did see the satellite BVA photos of thousands of Iraqi innocent civilians who were killed that day, while everybody else was watching our troops with Tommy Franks running up the highway there to Baghdad. On that day, we killed over 220,000 Iraqi civilians and maimed another 610,000. And the websites have been blocked here, but I think if you go to Doctors Without Borders, there may still be some photographs of 2- and 3-year-old Iraqi children with no arms and legs. And I'm not talking about some missing some legs, some missing. I'm talking missing all 4 appendages. Now, that's a war crime, and we did that. And so that's our Dachau moment. Then you have Dick Cheney openly says on television, yeah, he authorized torture, a violation of the Geneva and Hague Conventions. He openly says it, and it's like, so what? Well, by his own admission, he's a war. So we're going to see these things come out. There will be tribunals, and the tribunals will either be done by us or they'll be administered by an international tribunal made up of, probably a composite of whoever the 140 nations decide they want to send. But there will be a day of reckoning. That much I guarantee you. And the American people are going to choke on this because they're going to have their Dachau moment. They're going to get marched through the concentration camp, and they're going to see all the things that have been done that they thought were funny. I remember if we go back to when Carter was president, and we had the issue with our hostages in Tehran, and people were running around, nuke the Iranians, nuke the Iranians, nuke the Iranians, and we were all supporting the Shah and all this stuff. Well, people never looked really hard at the Shah. This was a guy that was so despicable that he murdered his own father to become an American puppet to take over Iran. Now, think about that. Who among you would kill your own father for money? Now, that's the kind of people that our government, who claims to be a democratic and freedom-loving nation, supports. These are the realities of history you have to look at. These are things that you can check. These are things you can Google. These are things you can do your own research on. And they've been in front of you all of your life.
So, now we mentioned about China before, how they basically were the ones that were pushing all of this, as far as they are basically, I guess, with all the debt and all the things that have happened, China basically has their thumb to be able to push the people, I guess you'd say the dark side of the force, out and force them to basically give up their power to allow, things to get back to some equality, an equal playing field and so forth. But at the same time, you also have other countries. It's not just China. And I just want you to kind of elaborate a little bit more on that, because, people are going to see, well, China's taken over all these banks. They're coming into America. They want to take over this. What's going on with the banking system? How can they shut these, these banks down, because they're not certified, whatever, so forth and so on. So if you can give any sort of, color on that, that would be great.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's give a little perspective. First, right now, out of the Mideast, out of the 10 tankers, oil tankers that leave the Mideast, 1 will go west to the United States and 9 will go east to China. China is importing a huge amount of oil, and it is in their best interest to stabilize the Mideast and to get rid of the OPEC cabal created by Bush and Rockefeller. And they level the playing field not just for themselves, but for the entire world. And we have to keep this in perspective of why they're doing this. These people in China, the elders, the people that are behind the scenes that are the kingmakers, these people are not their politicians. These people are not in the Communist Party. They use the communist concept to unify China into a very strong nation. Right now, China has a much higher literacy rate than children in the United States do. Right now, China has the fastest high-speed rail in the world. They're building infrastructure at an alarming rate. We have economists in this country that mock China when they say they're increasing their GDP by 9 to 13% a year, and we go, you can't possibly do that. That's impossible. Well, I want you to imagine the infrastructure that the United States had in 1905, and imagine if that was the infrastructure we have at this moment, and we had 3 times our population, and we were going to build out that infrastructure today based on what we had in 1905. That would be a huge, huge undertaking, and of course our GDP would explode at 9 to 13%, maybe 15% a year. And so that's what the Chinese are doing. They're not looking to expand. They're looking to enhance what they already have. And so to do that, they have to pull in an enormous amount of resources from Brazil and South America and from Southeast Asia and from India and from Europe and the Mideast and from Africa. And they are very, very pragmatic. They give to get. They understand that there has to be a symbiotic relationship. And we don't understand that. We don't believe in a game of where there's 2 winners. There's a winner and a loser in our thinking. In the Chinese thinking, there's a winner and a winner. That gives them long-term sustainability. We don't think in that terms. And so that is our downfall of understanding what they're doing. Now, I'm not saying they're altruistic. I'm saying they're very pragmatic. And they're pragmatic in this way. They are very powerful, and they're gaining more power each day by focusing on making their lives better. The Chinese elders do not want their grandchildren or their grandchildren's children to live under the threat of a nuclear holocaust. So in order to take that away for the betterment of an entire civilization, they've learned how to economically get what they want without firing a shot. And the Western civilization really struggles with understanding this, really has a problem with this, because we don't think that way. We want it now. Immediate gratification isn't fast enough. The Chinese will